So I missed a week. I was going through. I rewatched my videos to see kind of what I thought. Um, in response to some of the requests that I got, and I've seen a few things. I've got some notes down here. Is what I'm looking at. I realized something though, and it's going to impact what I do moving forward. As I listen to them, the first few seem to be a little bit more general, a little bit more designed to kind of reach out and make a connection, and then as I've gotten into some of the more specific things, it feels like I'm working on a sort of self-definition, a sort of trying to connect with who I am and my place in the world. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm wondering about the value in making that a public activity. There are things that I can talk that I think could be helpful to others, but if I'm doing this for myself, do I want to do it for the world to see? And when I say that, I recognize that I think I've got what, like 30 views is the most on one of my videos. I've got one dislike, which I'm fascinated by. I want to know what about that video that person didn't like. It was the one about masculinity, which doesn't surprise me because when we talk about masculinity, it can make a lot of people uncomfortable because it challenges some of their, some of how they define themselves in ways that we don't like. Anyway, so I wanted to put this there because I didn't want to just leave this hanging. I want to, if I'm going to put an end to this, I'd like to kind of put an end to it and not just let it trail off. I haven't done that yet, and I don't think I'm going to. I'm looking at this kind of this stuff. I have, well, here you can kind of see it there, and if you know, yeah, and it's a piece of scratch paper, um, in case it kind of showed through, and I don't know. Since we're talking about self-definition, I get curious about interesting things, about seeing some of the details for no real good reason. It's just something that moves me. I'm going to say one thing, though. I think there's merit in a suggestion I got to delve into some of the experiences that made me me. But I want to be careful about that because I don't want to share things that are going to actually hurt others. Yeah, I'm hyper concerned about me doing something that is going to cause someone else grief. And I know that can, in some ways, actually impede my own progress towards self-realization. But I can do those kind of things, I think, in private. So I'm thinking about things that I could share that are part of my experience. I think the fact that I was bullied in elementary school, to some extent in middle school, is hugely formative. I absolutely believe that my relationship with my parents is formative. My relationship with my brothers, I only have brothers. Those relationships are formative. Um, I also believe, though, that we come with certain personality traits, that there are things about us that are kind of coded into our DNA. But I think so I guess in this debate that many of you, I don't know, might not even be aware of, there's this question of what makes a person who they are. And we frequently say, well, is it nature? Are they born that way, or is it nurture? Were they raised that way? And I've become very convinced that it's some weird combination of both. Excuse me, and that yawn reminds me. So I received a suggestion that I kind of outline these and I kind of make them a little more polished, a little bit more refined, I guess. And I can understand where that comment's coming from because there have been a few of them where I kind of meander from point to point without a clear sense of direction. And this one's definitely kind of following that sort of pattern. But I think generally speaking, they're focused enough. And I also received some feedback that this makes it feel a little more conversational, like I'm sitting and talking with people. And I like that. So one of the things I'm going to be careful about is overly scripting whatever comes, because I don't want them to feel scripted. And that's part of my self-realization. I don't. I don't much value a whole lot of polish. I feel like frequently that ends up being a superficial fix for an underlying issue. Yeah. So, one thing for if that person who gave me a dislike would like to tell me why, what about that masculinity video bothered them, I'd love to respond. Why is one of the driving things that still sticks with me. I love to know why. For example, there's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints discourages cremation, and I wanted to know why. And so I dug into that for a long time. And I dug and I dug, and I finally found one piece of information that helped me to understand that, and that was I can't remember the source now, but it's on the church's official website. There is a tradition and a history of using cremation, of burning the body as a sign that the body is somehow sinful or evil. And because of that tradition, we have been told not to do so. And understanding that helps. Having a reason, and I know, you know, well, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, and so that's become part of my consideration because I gosh, I could go off on funerals and memorials and all of that stuff because I find them to be incredibly expensive and kind of a waste. Not all of it, and I'm all for people mourning and grieving in their own way. So if those things help people, that's great. Embalming weirds me out. I think cremation is less expensive and less problematic, but anyway, so I love to know why. And I imagine some of you might be saying, okay, so explain to me coffee and tea. And I can't. That's one of those things where my understanding is that God said, for whatever reason, we don't know why, despite what some of your, Church of Jesus Christ friends might say, we don't know why. God said coffee, tea. Didn't say caffeine. Didn't say hot chocolate. Coffee and tea. I don't know why. We could go off into theories, and there's always this desire, right? Immediately I'm thinking, well, because they're addictive, but so is caffeine. So are fats and sugars, and so are a whole bunch of other things. Why is it just coffee and tea? I mean, alcohol, there's some backing for it, there's some rationale for it, and of course, I've heard things like tannic acid and all this stuff, and we don't know. And that kind of bugs me. But I can accept some things on faith. I just like to know why. And so that person who gave me that downvote, I'd love to know why. I don't expect that we're going to have a meeting of the minds on this. I really don't. It wouldn't surprise me if finding out the reason why will lead me to say, well, okay, I disagree, but okay. But yeah. So anyway, and that's the thing about so much of what I do. It's been a struggle for me as I've been preparing to teach in a post-COVID world where a lot of the things that I love to do are considered to be less safe practices, and they're practices that I've been asked to not do. And one of the things that I love in education is a good discussion, a good conversation with some back and forth. And I know that as a teacher, I tend to take more time than my students. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I like to kind of minimize that. But I like dialogue. I like conversation. I like people to come back and say, well, here's what I see. Here's what I understand. It helps me to understand what kind of reception I'm getting. So yeah, I mean, as long as we're respectful and kind to each other, I don't mind a conversation. I do think that a lot of what's going on in social media, and I've been guilty of this myself, is not good conversation. It's argumentative and confrontational and unkind. And I don't want to be part of that, even though sometimes I am. I don't want to be. I want to be a much more pleasant person, a kinder person. I want to be someone that gets compared to, like Fred Rogers. Say, hey, he's kind of like Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I love that. I'm not there yet, and I'm not sure I will ever get there. There is a aggressive core to who I am that might keep me from being that person. But I'm working on being more like that. I think that there's merit in being that kind of person. So, again, this one's kind of a ramble. This one's kind of me just saying stuff. I didn't want to go 2 weeks without posting for the very simple reason that I'm not sure yet whether or not I want to end this. And if I do, I want to do it right and not just let it peter out. So I've got some things to consider talking about, some responses to some of the stuff that I've already talked about. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have too many loose threads, and I didn't really identify many. But yeah, that's where we are. So, for now, take care of yourselves and good luck.